In the summer of 1457, the most powerful empire on earth marched into a small, mountainous land with absolute confidence. 80,000 soldiers. Cannons that had broken the greatest walls in history. Generals who had never known hesitation. They expected fear. They expected surrender. They expected history to repeat itself. Instead, they found nothing. No armies. No battles. No resistance they could see. Only empty villages. Burned fields. Poisoned wells. And a silence so deep it felt intentional. Weeks passed. Then months. Supplies ran low. Disease spread. Soldiers began leaving in the dark, one by one. An army built to win fast was being forced to wait, and waiting was something it had never learned how to do. The Ottomans believed power was enough. They believed size solved all problems. They believed enemies would always show themselves. One man understood how dangerous those beliefs were. He did not rush. He did not challenge their strength. He did not give them the battle they were built to win. He let the empire exhaust itself. And when the Ottomans finally relaxed, when they finally believed the danger was gone, the mountains came alive. What followed was not just a defeat. It was exposure. An empire discovered that its greatest strength only worked if the enemy agreed to fight on its terms. And this story is about the man who refused. Stay with us till the end for valuable insights. Like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. The Ottoman Empire in the mid-15th century was not just powerful. It was confident in a way only unstoppable systems become. For decades, their victories followed the same pattern. A massive army would arrive. Cannons would roll forward. Cavalry would spread across open land like a moving wall. Most enemies surrendered before the real fighting even began. Those who resisted were crushed quickly, then forgotten. This method worked so well that it stopped being questioned. By 1457, the Ottomans believed conquest was not something you earned. It was something that simply happened when you arrived. So when Sultan Mehmed II approved the invasion of Albania, no one in the command structure expected difficulty. Albania was small. Mountainous, yes, but poor, divided, and surrounded. The Ottomans had invaded it before. This was supposed to be clean-up. 80,000 soldiers crossed the border. They brought siege towers, heavy cavalry, engineers, medical units, supply trains stretching for miles. Everything an empire needed to end a rebellion in weeks. And at first, everything looked normal. The army moved forward. Camps were built. Scouts were sent ahead. Officers waited for reports of enemy movement. But the reports never came. Villages were empty. Houses stood open, food still inside, fires cold. Fields had been burned days earlier, not in panic, but carefully. Wells were filled with dirt or poisoned just enough to make water unusable. This was not chaos. This was preparation. Ottoman commanders assumed the Albanian fighters had fled into the hills. That was fine. Fear always came first. Once the army showed its size, resistance usually collapsed on its own. So they waited. Days passed. Still nothing. No ambushes. No messengers. No scouts captured. No signals from the mountains. Silence like this made experienced officers uncomfortable, but the system had answers for discomfort. Wait longer. Advance slower. Let the enemy break first. The problem was simple. The Ottoman army was built for movement, not stillness. Every day they remained in Albania without a battle, supplies shrank. Horses needed grain. Soldiers needed clean water. Disease began spreading through camps that were never meant to stay in one place for long. Morale started to shift. At night, men whispered. Why weren't they attacking? Where was Skanderbeg? Why did the land feel empty but hostile at the same time? Desertions began quietly. One man missing. Then another. Officers punished some, ignored others. No one wanted to admit fear was spreading faster than orders. Ottoman power depended on momentum. On the feeling that resistance was useless. But momentum only exists when something pushes against you. Here, nothing did. And that was the problem. What the Ottomans didn't understand, what they couldn't understand yet, was that Skanderbeg was not trying to stop them. He was letting them arrive. He was letting them settle. He was letting them believe their presence alone was victory. Because he knew something the empire did not. An army designed to conquer quickly begins to fail when nothing happens at all. And Albania had decided to give them nothing. Ottoman commanders were trained to read the battlefield. They knew how to react to noise, movement, resistance, panic. What they were not trained for was absence. By the second month of the invasion, the silence stopped feeling temporary. It began to feel intentional. Scouts returned with the same reports again and again. Mountain paths were empty. Forests showed no sign of camps. Villages remained deserted, as if the population had vanished before the army even crossed the border. This created a problem no battle plan addressed. An enemy you cannot see cannot be surrounded. An enemy you cannot locate cannot be forced to fight. The Ottomans tried to solve this the only way they knew how, by spreading out. Units were sent in different directions to secure food and water. Patrols moved deeper into the hills. Cavalry swept valleys that looked wide enough for ambushes but never revealed one. Every decision weakened the army a little more. Smaller units meant weaker supply protection. Longer routes meant more exhaustion. Horses began dying from lack of feed. Medical tents filled with sick soldiers instead of wounded ones. Still, there was no sign of Skanderbeg. This was not fear. This was discipline. Skanderbeg had ordered his forces to disappear completely. No raids. No attacks. No harassment. Fighters were told to stay hidden even when opportunities appeared. Even when Ottoman patrols passed close enough to strike. This was the hardest kind of command to give. Soldiers are trained to act. To respond. To fight. Skanderbeg demanded the opposite. He demanded patience. He demanded silence. He demanded trust that waiting would hurt the enemy more than attacking ever could. And he was right. The Ottoman army was not being defeated by Albanian weapons. It was being defeated by Albanian restraint. As weeks turned into months, the invasion lost its purpose. Commanders argued over what victory even meant now. There were no cities to capture. No leaders to arrest. No army to destroy. Some officers suggested withdrawing and returning later. Others feared that leaving without a battle would look like weakness. Messages to the capital became carefully worded, full of confidence that did not match reality. Inside the camps, soldiers felt the truth more clearly. They were tired, hungry, sick, and increasingly unsure why they were there at all. The land itself seemed hostile. Paths led nowhere. Local guides disappeared. Every sound in the night felt threatening because nothing ever followed it. The Ottomans were used to being feared. Now they were the ones afraid of shadows. Skanderbeg watched all of this from the mountains. He did not rush. He did not strike. he let time do the work. Because he understood something simple and dangerous. An empire that believes force solves everything becomes helpless when force has nothing to hit. By late summer, Ottoman commanders reached a conclusion that felt logical. The Albanians had broken. The rebellion had scattered. Skanderbeg's forces were gone. The threat had dissolved. So the army did what tired armies always do when they think danger has passed. They relaxed. They chose a wide, open plain. Flat land. Good visibility. A perfect place to rest before marching home. Camps were spread out. Guards became careless. Weapons were stored instead of carried. For the first time in months, the Ottomans stopped expecting an enemy. And that was the moment Skanderbeg had been waiting for. Skanderbeg did not believe in sudden decisions. Nothing he did was accidental. The attack that was coming had been planned for months, not days. While the Ottomans searched empty valleys and argued in their tents, Albanian fighters were being positioned quietly across the mountains. Supplies were hidden. Signals were arranged. Routes were memorized until every man knew where to move in darkness without a single spoken word. This was not chaos. This was control without visibility. Skanderbeg understood something the Ottomans did not. Large armies depend on routine. They need schedules, supply times, guard rotations, and predictable movement. The longer an army stays in one place, the more those routines become habits. And habits create blind spots. When the Ottomans set up camp on the open plain, they believed they were safe. The terrain looked perfect. Nothing could approach without being seen. That was the logic. But that logic only worked against enemies who behaved normally. Skanderbeg did not plan to approach. He planned to surround. From the hills and forests beyond the plain, Albanian units moved into position without being noticed. They did not camp. They did not light fires. They did not move during daylight. They waited. Every soldier knew the rule: no action until the signal. That signal came at dawn. The Ottomans were not prepared for combat. Many soldiers were sleeping. Others were eating. Horses were not saddled. Commanders were scattered across the camp, not in formation. Then the mountains spoke. Attacks came from multiple directions at once. Not in waves, not in lines, but in sudden, overwhelming bursts of violence that shattered the illusion of safety. Ottoman units tried to form ranks, but confusion spread faster than orders. Some commanders believed this was a raid. Others thought it was a full assault. No one had time to be sure. Albanian cavalry hit the flanks first, cutting through areas where defenses were weakest. Infantry poured down from higher ground, striking supply tents, command centers, and escape routes. This was not a battle meant to be won through strength. It was meant to break structure. Ottoman soldiers who had survived months of fear without combat now faced violence without warning. Panic replaced discipline. Orders conflicted. Units ran into each other while trying to retreat. Skanderbeg's men knew exactly where to strike because they had been watching the camp for weeks. They knew where the officers slept. They knew where weapons were stored. They knew which paths led nowhere. The Ottomans tried to fight back, but it was too late. An army that is relaxed cannot become disciplined fast enough. By midday, the invasion force was collapsing. Thousands were dead or captured. Survivors fled in every direction, abandoning equipment, supplies, and wounded comrades. One capture mattered more than all the others. Hamza Kastrioti, Skanderbeg's own nephew, who had joined the Ottomans and was supposed to help destroy the Albanian resistance, was taken alive. Skanderbeg did not execute him. That decision was deliberate. Killing would have ended the story. Capturing him turned it into a message. By sunset, the Ottoman invasion of 1457 was over. Not because it lost a battle, but because it lost control. And the empire now faced something worse than defeat. It faced humiliation. The defeat of the Ottoman army in 1457 shocked the empire, but not for the reasons outsiders imagined. The Ottomans did not believe they had been outfought. They believed they had been misled. And that belief was dangerous. Inside the empire, commanders searched for explanations that did not challenge the system itself. They blamed scouts. They blamed weather. They blamed poor discipline in the camps. Individual failures were easier to accept than a structural one. But the truth was simpler and far more uncomfortable. The Ottoman military was built to solve specific problems. It excelled at open battles, long sieges, and fast-moving campaigns that forced enemies into quick decisions. Everything about the system depended on pressure. Skanderbeg removed the pressure. By refusing to give the empire a decisive moment, he turned every strength into a weakness. The massive army became slow. The long supply lines became fragile. The need for quick victory became frustration. The Ottomans could not force Skanderbeg to fight because their power only worked when the enemy participated. This was not a flaw anyone had noticed before. Empires rarely study what happens when someone refuses to play their game. After the disaster, Sultan Mehmed II took personal control of the campaign. He was not just angry. He was threatened. The defeat did not cost him territory. It cost him reputation. Reputation was the empire's invisible weapon. It made cities surrender without sieges. It made rulers hesitate before rebelling. It turned size into fear. Skanderbeg had cracked that illusion. So the response was escalation. Larger armies were sent. Siege cannons that had destroyed Constantinople were dragged into Albania. Fortresses were bombarded. Entire regions were burned in an attempt to force submission. None of it solved the real problem. Even when the Ottomans captured ground, they could not hold it securely. Supply convoys were attacked. Garrisons disappeared at night. Roads were never safe. Every victory demanded enormous resources and delivered very little in return. And worse, every campaign dragged on. The empire was winning battles but losing time. Skanderbeg understood this better than anyone. He did not try to protect every village. He did not defend territory for pride. He let the Ottomans take what they wanted, knowing they could not keep it. His goal was not conquest. It was denial. As long as the Ottomans remained in Albania, they bled money, soldiers, and confidence. As long as they stayed, they looked weak to their enemies elsewhere. This forced the empire into an impossible choice. Leave and admit failure. Stay and continue losing strength. They stayed. And the longer they stayed, the more obvious the lesson became. Overwhelming force means nothing if your enemy refuses to give you a reason to use it. Skanderbeg had not defeated the Ottoman Empire. He had exposed it. Empires do not collapse all at once. They weaken quietly, in places most people never notice. After 1457, the Ottoman Empire still looked powerful from the outside. Armies marched. Taxes flowed. Cities obeyed. Maps did not change much. But inside the system, something had shifted. Confidence had cracked. For decades, Ottoman commanders believed that resistance was temporary. Every enemy eventually stood still. Every rebellion reached a point where fear outweighed hope. Albania broke that assumption. Skanderbeg had shown that an enemy did not need to win to survive. He only needed to last. This idea spread faster than any army. Other regions noticed that the Ottomans struggled in Albania year after year. European courts began to talk differently. Not about defeating the empire in open battle, but about exhausting it, about delaying it, about forcing it into terrain and situations where size stopped mattering. The Ottoman reputation had been built on certainty. When they arrived, the outcome felt decided. Albania made the outcome uncertain. That uncertainty was poison. Inside the military, officers became cautious in ways they never had before. Campaigns into difficult terrain were questioned. Logistics were studied more carefully. Commanders worried about long-term cost instead of quick victory. This was not weakness, but it was hesitation. And hesitation is deadly for a system built on speed. Skanderbeg continued exactly as before. No grand offensives. No attempt to expand. No effort to build an empire of his own. He did not even try to permanently drive the Ottomans out. He simply made their presence unbearable. When armies came, he disappeared. When they relaxed, he struck. When they fortified, he waited. When they withdrew, he let them go. This rhythm lasted years. The Ottomans returned again and again, each time with more force, more planning, more anger. Each time they left frustrated, exhausted, and unsure what else could be done. Even victories felt hollow. Holding Albania required constant effort. Every road had to be guarded. Every supply line protected. Every garrison reinforced. The cost never stopped. And all of it was being spent on a land that offered no great wealth, no major cities, no strategic reward worth the price. Skanderbeg understood something most leaders never do. Power is not about how much you can take. It is about how much effort your enemy must spend to take it. By that measure, Albania had become one of the most expensive problems the Ottoman Empire had ever faced. And all of it traced back to one decision. The decision not to fight when fighting was expected. By refusing decisive battles, Skanderbeg denied the empire its favorite weapon, finality. There was no clear win. No moment to declare success. Only an endless drain. When Skanderbeg eventually died in 1468, not in battle but from illness, the resistance weakened. Without his discipline and patience, coordination failed. The Ottomans moved in and absorbed Albania at last. On paper, the empire won. But the lesson remained. For 25 years, the most powerful military system in the world had been unable to force one man to fight on its terms. And that kind of victory leaves scars no conquest can erase. When the Ottoman Empire finally absorbed Albania, the war was already over in the only way that truly mattered. Skanderbeg was gone. But the question he left behind did not disappear with him. How do you defeat an enemy who refuses to fight the way you need them to fight? For centuries, empires had answered that question with force. More soldiers. Bigger weapons. Stronger pressure. That approach worked because most enemies reacted the same way. They defended cities. They gathered armies. They stood still. Skanderbeg had done none of that. He never tried to match the Ottomans. He never tried to look strong. He never tried to look impressive. He made himself difficult. That choice forced the empire into a position it had no solution for. The Ottoman system was designed to end conflicts, not sustain them forever. It needed decisions. It needed moments where victory could be declared. Albania offered only delay. And delay was corrosive. Every year spent in Albania was a year not spent elsewhere. Every soldier tied down was a soldier not conquering new territory. Every supply train ambushed was money burned for no gain. Over time, Ottoman planners began to understand the danger. Not just of Skanderbeg, but of what he represented. If power only works when the enemy accepts it, then power is not absolute. That idea quietly entered strategic thinking. Campaigns into mountains became more cautious. Long occupations were avoided when possible. Commanders became more aware that enemies could win by surviving. Skanderbeg's resistance was studied, not celebrated. Empires do not like reminders of their limits. What made his story uncomfortable was not the defeats he inflicted. It was the restraint, the refusal, the patience. He never gave the Ottomans a clean ending. He denied them the story they needed to tell themselves. Even after Albania fell, the empire could not erase the memory of those years. Too many resources had been wasted. Too many assumptions had failed. Skanderbeg had turned inevitability into uncertainty. And uncertainty spreads. History often celebrates conquerors. It remembers cities taken, armies destroyed, flags raised over walls. It rarely remembers those who refused to be conquered by simply refusing to cooperate. Skanderbeg did not defeat the Ottoman Empire. He revealed something more dangerous. That empires are powerful only as long as their enemies believe they are. When belief breaks, even the strongest systems begin to struggle. That is why his story mattered. Not because of what he took, but because of what he denied. And that is a lesson every empire learns eventually. Often too late.